The Silent Challenge. The afternoon sun filtered through the windows of the Junfan Gung Fu gym, casting long shadows across the mat. Bruce Lee sat on a wooden bench, arms crossed over his chest, eyes half closed as he watched his students train. Sweat glistened on the young people's skin, and the rhythmic sound of blows echoed off the walls. He breathed deeply, enjoying that moment of stillness between sessions. It was then that the door opened with a bang. A tall man, with broad shoulders and an arrogant posture, entered the space as if he owned the place. He wore an impeccable white gi, with the black belt tied with military precision. His dark eyes scanned the room with disdain before landing on Bruce, who barely looked up. "Is this the famous Bruce Lee?" The newcomer let out a dry laugh, crossing his arms. "I heard you're a legend. But looking at you, you look more like a kid after practice." The students stopped training, silence spreading like a wave. Some exchanged nervous glances. Bruce, however, didn't move. He just tilted his head slightly, as if he was listening to something far away. "I'm Hiroshi Tanaka," the karateka announced, hitting his own chest. "5th Dan black belt in Shotokan. I came here to see if the stories about you are true. Or if he's just another little Chinese guy trying to impress." One of Bruce's students, a young man named Danny, stepped forward, ready to defend his master. Bruce raised his hand, stopping him with an almost imperceptible gesture. Then, finally, he stood up. There was no hurry in his movements. He approached Tanaka with the calm of someone who knows time is on their side. When he stopped just over a meter away from the karateka, his dark eyes met the challenger's, cold and calculating. "You talk a lot," Bruce said, his voice low, almost a whisper. "But words don't break bones." Tanaka snorted, puffing out his chest. "Then prove that it's not just talk." "A cue might." "No rules. Just the two of us." Bruce didn't respond right away. Instead, he took a step back and assumed a relaxed posture, hands loose at his sides. Tanaka, impatient, advanced with a direct, fast and powerful punch aimed at Bruce's face. The coup never arrived. In a movement so fluid it seemed like an illusion, Bruce dodged to the side, his right hand shooting out like a snake. The fingers closed around Tanaka's wrist, and before the karateka could react, Bruce spun his body, using the momentum of the punch against him. A perfect tai sabaki, Tanaka was thrown forward, tripping over his own feet. But Bruce didn't let him fall. With his other hand, he grabbed the collar of Tanaka's gi and pulled him back hard, while his knee rose in a devastating arc. The impact was dry, brutal. Tanaka's nose exploded in a spray of blood, and the sound of bones breaking echoed through the gym. The karateka staggered, eyes wide with shock, trying to balance himself. Bruce didn't stop. In the blink of an eye, his right leg whipped out in a sideways mawashi jeri, striking Tanaka's ribs with surgical precision. The sound was like thunder, crack. The karateka was thrown against the wall, sliding to the floor, where he was curled up, groaning, his hands covering his bloodied face. 6 seconds. That was all it took. Bruce returned to his initial stance, as if nothing had happened. The air in the gym was charged, students with their mouths open, some with their hands over their mouths. Tanaka coughed, spitting out blood, his eyes filled with humiliation and pain. You didn't fight fair," he stammered, his voice muffled by his hands. Bruce tilted his head, as if considering the statement. "Fighting fair is for those who have time to waste," he said, calmly. "I'd rather get this over with quickly. Less suffering for everyone." Then, without another word, he sat back down on the bench, crossing his arms again. The students, little by little, resumed training, but now with a new respect in their eyes. And Tanaka, dragging himself out of the gym, never challenged Bruce Lee again. Final chapter, The Weight of Victory. The following days were strange. The gym, once a place of screams and sweat, now echoed with respectful silence. The students trained with more discipline, but their gazes shifted whenever Bruce approached. He noticed. I knew that, in a way, I had crossed a line, not just with Tanaka, but with all of them. Sifu, do you think he will come back? Asked one of the younger students, a boy named Lee, as he wrapped his hand wraps. Bruce didn't look up from the punching bag he was hitting with mechanical precision. If I come back, it won't be to fight, he replied, without stopping. It will be to learn. But Tanaka didn't return. And over time, his absence became a constant presence, like a shadow that refuses to disappear. A week later, Bruce was called into Master IP Man's office. The old Sifu was sitting at his desk, his hands clasped on an ancient parchment. He didn't look up when Bruce entered. Sit down. Bruce complied, but his posture remained rigid, as if expecting a blow. You humiliated a student, said Ip Man, finally. It wasn't the first time. He challenged me. And you broke it. Bruce clenched his fists, but kept his voice controlled. I saved him from greater suffering. If it had been prolonged, he would have been worse off. Ip Man sighed, as if the answer was exactly what he expected. Bruce, Kung Fu is not just about winning. It's about respect. About teaching, even when we don't want to. You have talent, but talent without control is like a sword without a sheath, it cuts everything around, including yourself. Bruce didn't respond. He knew his master was right, but something inside him rebelled against the idea of containing his strength. He wasn't like the others. Never been. You will travel to the United States soon, continued IP Man, your father wants you to study there, away from the conflicts here. Bruce looked up, surprised. Are you expelling me? I'm giving you a chance to grow, corrected the master. There, you won't be just another student. There, he will have to prove to himself that he is more than a fighter. Who is a master? Preparations for the trip were quick. Bruce packed his things in silence, without dramatic goodbyes. I knew that, in a way, I was running away not from Hong Kong, but from the image I had created there. The night before leaving, as he was packing a suitcase, he heard a soft knock on the door. It was Lee, the boy who had asked about Tanaka. Sifu, he hesitated, holding something in his hands. I did this for you, sir. It was a small wooden amulet, carved with the dragon symbol. Bruce took it, feeling the light weight between his fingers. Thanks. Lee smiled shyly. Are you going to come back? Bruce looked at the amulet, then at the boy. Perhaps. But if you don't come back, remember one thing, Kung Fu isn't about who you defeat. It's about who you lift. The boy nodded, but Bruce saw the doubt in his eyes. He himself wasn't sure he believed those words. The ship left at dawn. Bruce stood on the deck, watching Hong Kong move away, the city lights fading into distant dots. He felt the wind on his face and, for the first time in a long time, something like peace. But deep down, I knew the fight wasn't over. Just moved. And when the ship disappeared over the horizon, Bruce Lee closed his eyes and took a deep breath. The world was big. And he was ready to conquer it. Final chapter, The Dragon Awakens. The months that followed were a succession of unfamiliar voices, strange smells and the constant weight of loneliness. Bruce disembarked in San Francisco, where the cold bay air cut into his skin like invisible blades. There were no masters waiting for him, no eager disciples. Just a young Chinese man of 21, with a beat-up suitcase and a name that sounded too foreign to remember. He worked washing dishes at a Chinatown restaurant, sleeping in a tiny room above the kitchen, where the smell of burning oil clung to the walls. At night, he trained alone in the alley behind the establishment, kicking the air, repeating sequences until his muscles burned. The other waiters laughed at him, calling him crazy or the one who dances in the dark. Bruce didn't care. I knew that strength did not come from recognition, but from persistence. It was at one of these night practices that he met Jesse Glover, a tall, soft-spoken black man, who stopped to observe him curiously. Jesse had a black belt in judo and, unlike the others, he didn't laugh. He just crossed his arms and asked, Do you always train like this, or only when no one is looking? Bruce stopped, wiping the sweat from his forehead. When no one is looking, I train more. Jesse smiled. Then you're my kind of people. They started training together. Jesse taught judo, Bruce, Wing Chun. The two challenged each other, pushed each other beyond their limits, and soon others joined them. A small group formed in the basement of an abandoned church, where the low ceiling forced Bruce to adapt his movements. It was there that he realized that Kung Fu was not a static art, but something living, breathing and transforming. He started mixing styles, experimenting, breaking rules. But not everything was victories. In 1964, Bruce was invited to the Long Beach International Karate Championships, a tournament where the best fighters in the world gathered. He wouldn't compete, he would just demonstrate his techniques. However, when he got on the mat, the murmurs started. Look, a Chinese guy doing acrobatics. That's not karate. He must be a dancer. Bruce ignored it. He showed off his 1-inch punch, knocking down a volunteer with a punch of just a few centimeters. The audience fell silent. Then, he executed kicks so fast that they seemed like blurs. When he finished, the audience burst into applause. But behind the scenes, a Japanese karate master confronted him. You're fast, said the man, with disdain. But Kung Fu is no match for real karate. Bruce looked at him, calm. Then let's see. The duel was scheduled for the following day, in a warehouse at the back of the tournament. There were no rules, no judges. Just two men in the pride of their arts. The Japanese master was heavier, more experienced, and attacked with brutal blows. Bruce dodged, counterattacked with precision, but was hit in the shoulder. The pain was intense, but he didn't back down. When the Japanese tried a high kick, Bruce grabbed him and threw him to the ground with a hip throw he learned from Jesse. The man stood up, furious, but Bruce was already on his feet, hands raised. He arrives? The master hesitated, then nodded, embarrassed. You're good. But Kung Fu is still inferior. Bruce smiled. It is not inferior. It's just different. And the difference is what makes you strong. That fight changed everything. Rumors spread, and soon Hollywood producers began looking for him. First, small roles in TV series, The Green Hornet, Batman. Then, The Invitation to the Chinese Dragon, a film in which he would be the protagonist. Bruce accepted, but demanded creative control. I wanted to show Kung Fu as it was, fluid, lethal, beautiful. The studios resisted. Americans won't understand, they said. It needs to be more exotic. More magical. Bruce refused. I'm not going to turn my art into a circus show. He was fired. The disappointment was bitter, but it didn't stop him. In 1971, he returned to Hong Kong, where local cinema was on the rise. The Chinese Dragon had been a hit there, and the producers welcomed it with open arms. The Big Boss was filmed in 3 weeks, on a tight budget and with improvised scenes. When it debuted, it broke box office records. Fist of Fury came next, and then The Way of the Dragon, where Bruce not only starred but also wrote, directed and choreographed the fights. It was while filming the latter that he met Chuck Norris, a karate champion who came to Hong Kong for a fight at the Coliseum. The two faced each other in one of the most iconic scenes in cinema, and, despite the staged rivalry, they became friends. Chuck, impressed with Bruce's skill, asked, "Do you think you would win in a real fight?" Bruce laughed. "I don't know. But I know that if we fought, we would both come out better." As his fame grew, Bruce also faced personal battles. His body, always pushed to the limit, began to show warning signs. Constant headaches, exhaustion. Doctors diagnosed a rare condition, swelling in the brain caused by an allergic reaction to a medication. You need to rest, they said. Train less. Bruce didn't listen. In 1973, while preparing Game of Death, he passed out in the studio. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors confirmed the worst: his body was on the verge of collapse. If you continue like this, you won't reach 30, they warned. He was 32 years old. That night, in his apartment in Kowloon, Bruce looked in the mirror. The face that stared at him was thinner, the eyes sunken. But the flame still burned. He took out his diary and wrote. Life is a process of becoming. A constant effort to overcome yourself. It doesn't matter how many times you fall, what matters is how many times you get up. And I'm not done getting up yet. On July 20, 1973, Bruce Lee was found unconscious in his bedroom. Taken to the hospital, he didn't survive. The official cause was cerebral edema, but the world preferred to believe in theories: poison, curse, a secret struggle. The truth was simpler and crueler: his body couldn't handle the weight of his own determination. Hong Kong stopped for his funeral. Thousands of people filled the streets, mourning the man who had turned Kung Fu into an art, the boy from Hong Kong who became a global icon. In the coffin, they placed a nunchaku, a pair of boxing gloves and a copy of the Tao of Jeet Kune Do, the book he was writing. Years later, Lee, now a grown man, visited Bruce's grave. The amulet he had given his master was still around his neck, now worn away by time. You were right, he murmured, touching the tombstone. Kung Fu is not about who you defeat. It's about who you lift. And as the wind blew through the cemetery trees, Lee closed his eyes and smiled, as if he had heard an answer. A dragon's legacy. The years following Bruce Lee's death were marked by a shadow that hung over the world of martial arts. The void he left behind was palpable, not just in Hong Kong, but in every dojo, in every ring, in every heart that had been touched by his philosophy. Gyms that once buzzed with energy now seemed to echo with unanswered questions. What would he have done? How would it have evolved? Who would carry your torch? Lee, now 30 years old, felt this weight every day. He had become a respected master, but he never allowed himself to forget his mentor's lessons. His dojo in Kowloon was simple, unostentatious, just worn mats, battered punching bags, and a mural with photos of Bruce at different points in his life. The students who came to him didn't just come to learn moves, they came in search of something deeper, something that Lee tried to convey with the same passion that Bruce had once dedicated to him. But not everyone saw martial arts in the same way. One day, a man named Victor Kwan appeared at the dojo. Tall, muscular, with scars that told stories of brutal fights, he was the opposite of everything Lee represented. Victor did not believe in the pathless path philosophy. For him, Kung Fu was just a tool of domination, a way to prove his superiority. And he had come to Hong Kong with one purpose: to destroy Bruce Lee's legacy. I heard you were his student, said Victor, standing at the entrance to the dojo, his arms crossed. I want to see if you learned anything. Lee did not respond immediately. He knew that this was not a simple demonstration of skill. It was a challenge to Bruce's memory, an attempt to reduce his teaching to nothing more than empty technique. But he also knew he couldn't refuse. The fight took place in the old ring where Bruce had trained, now renovated, but still carrying the energy of his past. The crowd that gathered to watch wasn't just students, there were reporters, fighters from other disciplines, even some of Bruce's old rivals, curious to see if Lee would be able to honor his master. Victor attacked first, with frightening speed, his blows loaded with brute force. Lee dodged fluidly, using as little movement as necessary to dodge, as Bruce had taught him. His every counterattack was precise, calculated, without wasting energy. But Victor wouldn't give up. He wanted blood. In the third round, Victor managed to land a punch on Lee's face, making him retreat. The audience murmured, some openly rooting against him. But Lee felt no pain. He felt something else, Bruce's presence at his side, as if the wind itself was whispering in his ear. Don't fight him. Fight for him. And then, Lee changed. No longer defending himself, he began to attack, not in anger, but with purpose. Every blow of his was a lesson. Each block, a demonstration of control. Victor, accustomed to dominating his opponents by force, found himself lost. He wasn't fighting a man. I was struggling with an idea. In the end, Victor fell to his knees, not from a knockout, but from exhaustion. He looked at Lee, his chest heaving, his eyes filled with something that wasn't hate but understanding. I don't understand, he admitted, his voice hoarse. Lee reached out his hand to help him up. Now you are ready to learn. Years later, Lee's dojo was one of the most respected in the world. Victor Kwan, now his most dedicated student, had become one of the greatest defenders of Bruce Lee's philosophy. Together they traveled the world, teaching not just techniques, but the essence of what it meant to be a martial artist. One peaceful night, Lee returned to the cemetery where Bruce was buried. The amulet around his neck glowed in the moonlight. I did what I could, he said, placing a flower on the tombstone. But I think the world still needs more dragons. And then, as if in response, a gentle breeze rustled the leaves of the trees, and Lee smiled. Because, somewhere, Bruce was smiling back.